Austria is a country of contrasts, a place where alpine peaks meet bustling cities, where traditions blend with modernity, and where the promise of European unity is being re-examined at its borders. For decades, Europe symbolized something extraordinary: the dismantling of walls, the fading of barriers, and the creation of a shared space where people could move freely, dream bigger, and feel a sense of belonging that transcended national lines. But today, on Austria's frontiers, that vision of unity is being redefined. Blue sirens flash across wet asphalt as highway checks disrupt the flow of traffic. Patrols scan mountain passes with flashlights, and silent drones hover overhead, tracing movements in the snow. Here, the ideals of an open Europe meet the hard reality of what borders are for in a world that feels increasingly uncertain. Austria is no stranger to reinvention. Once a beacon of pragmatism and welcome in the European Union, its policies now reflect a sharp pivot: temporary fences, tightened checks, stricter asylum rules, and alliances that aim to push migration management far beyond Europe's shores. This shift isn't just about Austria. It's a stress test for the Schengen Agreement, the cornerstone of Europe's border-free zone. What happens here could be a preview of where the entire continent is headed. The story begins in the mid-2010s, during a period that would come to define European migration politics. The surge of people seeking safety and opportunity, many fleeing war and instability, hit Austria with full force. Train stations became makeshift reception centers. Volunteers worked tirelessly to provide food and shelter. Headlines captured moments of both hope and heartbreak as the country's capacity to absorb newcomers was stretched to its limits. At first, there was compassion, an outpouring of humanity that saw Austria step up to meet the crisis with courage. But as the weeks turned into months, and the numbers continued to rise, the tone began to shift. Crowded reception centers, tragic incidents of smuggling, and growing fears about the strain on public services brought about a political recalibration. Political leaders, once careful in their language, began to promise clear lines and hard limits. They spoke of pulling the brake, of securing borders, of ensuring that the crisis would not repeat itself. Laws were tightened. Fast-track rejections at entry points became the norm. Family reunifications faced new hurdles, and temporary protection statuses left many in a state of perpetual uncertainty. What was once seen as a humanitarian challenge became framed as a question of national security and social stability. Austria's borders themselves took on a new role. The Brenner Pass, long a symbol of European openness, became a site of spot checks and patrols. Police waved cars to the side, soldiers monitored crossings, and barriers appeared when traffic spiked. These measures weren't just about controlling movement, they were about sending a message. Vienna's logic was clear: disrupt smuggling networks, verify who's entering, and make it known that Austria would not be an easy crossing point. In this way, the border became more than a geographical line. It became a stage for policy, a broadcast to the world that Austria was taking a stand. For those who managed to enter Austria, the challenges didn't end at the border. Inside the country, the focus shifted from fences to forms. Integration policies tied benefits to language proficiency. Small stipends were linked to community work. Temporary statuses created a sense of limbo for many, stretching into years without clear resolution. Critics argue that these measures amount to pressure disguised as policy, forcing people to navigate a maze of requirements while leaving them in a state of insecurity. Supporters, on the other hand, see these policies as necessary guardrails, ways to ensure cohesion by setting clear expectations, learn the language, follow the rules, and integrate into society. But this balancing act reveals a deeper tension. On one hand, newcomers need a sense of stability to truly integrate. On the other, communities need confidence in the system to accept those newcomers in the first place. These two truths often collide, creating a cycle of uncertainty that can be hard to break. Austria's stance on migration doesn't exist in isolation. Its policies ripple across Europe, shaping debates and influencing decisions in neighboring countries. When Vienna blocks Schengen expansion or demands tougher external borders, the effects are felt far beyond its own frontiers. Critics accuse Austria of undermining European unity, while supporters argue that it's practicing necessary realism in an increasingly complex world. Across the EU, the trend is unmistakable: faster border procedures, agreements with transit countries, and experiments with offshore processing centers. What was once a continent defined by free movement is now increasingly defined by friction management. Amid these debates lies a paradox that few are willing to address openly. Austria, like much of Europe, faces an aging population and labor shortages in key sectors. To fill these gaps, it expands skilled visa programs and recruits workers for industries like healthcare and construction. Yet the public conversation remains fixated on asylum seekers, not labor migrants. This creates a system with two doors, one heavily guarded and focused on security, the other selectively open to meet economic needs. It's a policy of control with quotas, balancing the demands of security and labor in a way that reflects the country's broader priorities. The tone of these debates is set by politicians who understand the power of language. In Vienna, speeches about borders and migration resonate deeply with voters. Leaders who once promised no repeat of 2015 turned those promises into legislation, framing migration as an ongoing emergency. Even parties traditionally associated with more open policies have accepted stricter limits to maintain political coalitions. Austria's political class has discovered a fundamental truth: in a time of uncertainty, border talk wins votes. And once the machinery of enforcement is built, it rarely winds down. Not everyone agrees with this trajectory. Across Austria, church groups, NGOs, students, and activists continue to advocate for a more compassionate approach. They argue for dignity, due process, and a return to the values that defined Europe in the wake of World War II. On the other side are voters who insist on rules first, borders first, and safety first. These two camps rarely clash directly, but their arguments form the backdrop of a debate that never truly goes away. By the mid-2020s, the results of Austria's policies began to take shape. Arrivals declined, and deportations increased. For the government, this was proof of success, a demonstration that the system was working as intended. Critics, however, pointed to the costs, legal bottlenecks, prolonged uncertainty for those caught in the system, and the human toll of policies that prioritize deterrence over dignity. Whether these measures are seen as a success or a failure depends on what you choose to measure: the number of people crossing the border, or the lives affected by the policies that keep them out. Austria's approach offers lessons for the rest of Europe. By assembling a mix of deterrence, rapid processing, external partnerships, and strict integration policies, it has created a model that other countries are watching closely. The question isn't whether Europe should copy Austria or condemn it, It's whether the continent can find a balance that keeps borders credible without losing the values that make it feel like home. In the end, borders are more than lines on a map. They're places where policies are tested, where ideals meet reality, and where nations decide who they are and who they want to be. Austria has pushed Europe toward a vision of control,